Guitarist Ace Frehley, one of the founding members of the rock group Kiss, has died. He was 70.
What if one of rock's biggest career downfalls wasn't caused by drugs or bad luck, but by a bandmate standing right next to him on stage? For years, fans have whispered the same question. Did Paul Stanley play a role in destroying Ace Frehley's career? In this video, we go behind the face paint of Kiss to uncover the power struggles, control issues, and decisions that pushed one legendary guitarist out of the spotlight, while another walked away with the empire. Stick around, because this story might change how you see Kiss forever. Who was the legendary Ace Frehley? Ace Frehley, born Paul Daniel Frehley on April 27, 1951, grew up in the Bronx, New York, in a working-class family where creativity and toughness were both part of daily life. His father was an accomplished pianist, and music was always present in the household, even if stability was not. Ace struggled in school, had difficulty fitting into structured environments, and was often described as a dreamer who learned best by doing rather than following rules. As a teenager, he gravitated toward the guitar, drawn especially to British blues rock players like Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, and Jeff Beck. Music became both an escape and a form of identity, something he could control in a world that often felt chaotic. Before fame, Frehley lived a rough, itinerant life typical of many aspiring musicians in early 1970s New York. He bounced between short-lived jobs, apartments, and bands, often scraping by with little money. Substance abuse became a recurring issue, something he would later openly acknowledge as both a coping mechanism and a destructive force. Despite these struggles, his natural melodic sense and distinctive guitar phrasing set him apart. He wasn't a technically flashy guitarist in the traditional sense, but his playing had personality, space, and attitude, qualities that would become essential to his later success. Ace joined Kiss in late 1972 after answering a newspaper ad placed by Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, who were forming a new band built around theatricality as much as music. At the audition, Frehley famously showed up wearing mismatched sneakers, one red, one orange, and nearly electrocuted himself when he accidentally touched a live wire on stage. Instead of hurting his chances, the incident and his raw, blues-infused playing sealed the deal. He soon adopted the Spaceman, or Space Ace persona, complete with silver makeup and cosmic imagery, which fit perfectly with Kiss's comic book-like approach to rock stardom. Kiss as a band was unlike anything audiences had seen before. Formed in New York City in 1973, the group combined hard rock with elaborate makeup, costumes, pyrotechnics, and shock theater stage antics. Gene Simmons's fire-breathing demon, Paul Stanley's flamboyant Starchild, Peter Criss's Catman, and Ace Frehley's Spaceman created instantly recognizable characters. While early studio albums gained modest attention, it was Kiss's relentless touring and explosive live shows that built their fan base. Their 1975 live album, Alive, became the breakthrough, capturing the raw energy that studio recordings had failed to fully convey. As Kiss ascended to superstardom in the mid to late 1970s, Ace Frehley emerged as a fan favorite. His guitar solos were melodic and memorable, and his laid-back, rebellious persona contrasted with the more driven leadership of Simmons and Stanley. Frehley also proved himself as a songwriter, contributing some of the band's most enduring tracks. Songs like Cold Gin, Shock Me, and Rocket Ride showcased his knack for catchy riffs, spacey leads, and relatable themes of excess, freedom, and alienation. Shock Me, in particular, was significant because it featured Frehley on lead vocals, further cementing his individual identity within the band. Kiss reached a level of fame few rock acts ever experience. They became a global brand, spawning merchandise, comic books, movies, and sold-out arena tours. Albums such as Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, and Love Gun produced classic tracks like Detroit Rock City, Beth, Love Gun, and Shout It Out Loud. In 1978, each member released a solo album on the same day, an unprecedented move that highlighted both their collective power and growing internal divisions. Ace Frehley's solo album was widely regarded as the strongest of the four, featuring the hit single New York Groove, which became one of the most successful songs associated with any Kiss member. Paul Stanley, born Stanley Burt Eisen on January 20, 1952 in Manhattan, New York, grew up in a very different emotional landscape than many of his bandmates, even though his background also carried its own hardships. He was born with microtia, a condition that left him deaf in his right ear, something that deeply affected his childhood. Stanley often spoke about feeling isolated, insecure, and bullied, and music became both a refuge and a way to build confidence. Unlike Ace Frehley's rough, streetwise upbringing, Stanley was more introspective and disciplined, driven by a need to prove himself and overcome perceived limitations. From an early age, Paul Stanley showed a strong work ethic and a clear vision of what he wanted to achieve. He was heavily influenced by classic rock, soul, and theatrical performers, and he believed that a band should offer more than just music. It should be an experience. This mindset became central to the formation of Kiss. Along with Gene Simmons, Stanley was a primary architect of the band's sound, image, and long-term direction. He was not just a singer and rhythm guitarist, but a leader who pushed relentlessly for professionalism, consistency, and control. Within Kiss, Paul Stanley adopted the star child persona, a flamboyant, charismatic frontman defined by confidence, sexuality, and connection with the audience. On stage, he was magnetic, commanding crowds with ease. Off stage, however, he was known to be intense, demanding, and uncompromising. Stanley took songwriting seriously and was responsible for many of Kiss's biggest anthems, including Love Gun, Detroit Rock City, Shout It Out Loud, and I Was Made for Lovin' You. His songs often emphasized empowerment, escape, and the emotional bond between band and fans, themes that helped Kiss resonate with millions. The relationship between Paul Stanley and Ace Frehley was complicated from the beginning, shaped by contrasting personalities and approaches to life. Ace was laid back, impulsive, and resistant to authority, while Paul was structured, ambitious, and deeply invested in maintaining control over the band's direction. In the early years, these differences actually worked to Kiss's advantage. Ace's loose, bluesy guitar style complemented Paul's tight songwriting, and the contrast between their personalities added depth to the band's dynamic. As Kiss rose to superstardom in the mid-1970s, tensions between the two grew. Paul Stanley increasingly took on a managerial role, making decisions about touring, recording schedules, and creative direction. Ace Frehley, meanwhile, began feeling marginalized and controlled, particularly as Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley asserted more authority. Ace often resisted studio discipline and corporate expectations, preferring spontaneity and freedom. This clash wasn't just musical, it was philosophical. Paul believed survival at the top required discipline and sacrifice. Ace believed the band was losing its soul. Substance abuse intensified the rift. Ace Frehley's struggles with alcohol and drugs affected his reliability. leading to missed sessions, uneven performances, and growing frustration within the band. From Paul Stanley's perspective, Ace was jeopardizing the group they had worked relentlessly to build. From Ace's perspective, Paul had become domineering and dismissive, more concerned with control than camaraderie. Resentment built on both sides, often expressed indirectly rather than resolved openly. The release of the 1978 solo albums highlighted this divide. While Ace's album was widely praised and commercially successful, Paul reportedly viewed it as further evidence that Ace was drifting away from the band's collective identity. Creative disagreements became more personal, and communication deteriorated. By the early 1980s, the tension was no longer sustainable. Ace Frehley left Kiss in 1982, a decision shaped by addiction, burnout, and unresolved conflicts with Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. Their relationship remained strained for years. Although they reunited in the late 1990s for the original Kiss lineup reunion tours, old wounds never fully healed. While the reunion was hugely successful financially and nostalgically, personal trust was limited. Paul Stanley has often spoken critically about Ace's behavior during that period, citing professionalism and commitment issues. Ace, in turn, has accused Paul of rewriting history, controlling narratives, and minimizing his contributions to the band. These public exchanges cemented the idea that their conflict was not just circumstantial, but deeply personal. After leaving Kiss in 1982, Ace Frehley found himself in a strange position. He was famous, influential, and financially secure, yet creatively unmoored and personally unstable. Walking away from one of the biggest bands in the world gave him freedom, but it also removed the structure that had kept him moving forward. The years immediately following his departure were marked by heavy substance abuse, long periods of isolation, and uncertainty about how to redefine himself outside the shadow of Kiss. It took a few years before Ace re-emerged in a focused way. In the mid-1980s, he formed a new band called Frehley's Comet, a project that allowed him to step fully into the spotlight as a leader rather than a character within a larger machine. The band released its self-titled debut album in 1987, which was well received by fans and critics who were eager to hear Ace back in a hard rock setting. The record leaned into melodic hooks, guitar-driven songs, and a slightly more modern metal sound, proving that his songwriting instincts were still sharp. Tracks like Rock Soldiers, which drew directly from his real-life experiences with addiction and legal trouble, revealed a more personal and vulnerable side of him. Despite this creative resurgence, Ace's personal struggles continued to interfere with momentum. Lineup changes within Frehley's Comet were frequent, touring was inconsistent, and the late 1980s music industry was shifting toward glam metal and, later, grunge. While Frehley's Comet released additional albums, including Second Sighting and Trouble Walkin', the project never reached the commercial heights many expected. Ace remained respected, but he was increasingly seen as a cult figure rather than a mainstream force. By the early 1990s, Ace began releasing music under his own name, rather than as part of a band. Albums like Trouble Walkin' still carried the Comet name informally, but the focus was clearly on Ace as a solo artist. His work during this period was uneven, reflecting both flashes of brilliance and the lingering effects of addiction. At times he seemed energized and inspired, at others, withdrawn and erratic. Still, his guitar tone, phrasing, and melodic sensibility remained unmistakable, and his influence on younger rock and metal musicians continued to grow. A major turning point came in the mid-1990s when Ace committed to sobriety. Cleaning up his life gave him clarity and stability that had been missing for decades. Around the same time, renewed public interest in classic Kiss and 1970s hard rock created an opening for reconciliation. This led to his participation in the original Kiss lineup reunion beginning in 1996, which temporarily returned him to massive stages and global attention. Even though that chapter eventually ended again, it reintroduced Ace to a new generation of fans and restored his status as a rock icon. After his final departure from Kiss in the early 2000s, Ace focused entirely on his solo career. Unlike earlier post-Kiss years, this phase was marked by consistency and purpose. He released a string of albums that were generally well received, including Anomaly, Space Invader, and Spaceman. These records showed an artist comfortable with his legacy, but still engaged creatively, blending classic hard rock energy with modern production while staying true to his signature style. In later years, Ace Frehley became something of an elder statesman of rock guitar. He toured regularly, appeared at conventions and festivals, and embraced his influence on countless musicians. While his relationship with Kiss remained distant, his post-Kiss life ultimately became a story of survival and self-definition. Free from makeup, characters, and internal power struggles, Ace carved out a second act on his own terms, less explosive than his rise with Kiss, but steadier, more honest, and deeply respected by fans who saw him not just as the spaceman, but as a musician who endured and kept going. Ace Frehley's legacy as a guitarist is rooted less in technical excess and more in identity, feel, and influence. He changed what a rock guitarist could be by proving that personality mattered as much as precision. Coming out of the 1970s New York rock scene, Frehley helped define the sound of arena rock and early heavy metal with a style that was raw, melodic, and unmistakably his own. His solos were rarely about speed. Instead, they told small stories, bending notes until they sounded slightly wounded or euphoric, always leaving space for the song to breathe. That sense of restraint, combined with a thick, distorted tone and blues-based phrasing, became a template for countless guitarists who followed. What truly set Ace apart was accessibility. Young players saw someone who didn't look like a conservatory-trained virtuoso, yet still sounded massive and unforgettable. He made guitar feel attainable without making it dull. Songs like Cold Gin, Shock Me, and Rocket Ride became rites of passage for aspiring rock musicians, and his 1978 solo work further cemented his reputation as a songwriter with a sharp, melodic instinct. Generations of players, from metal icons to punk and alternative musicians, have cited him as a foundational influence, not because he dazzled them with technique, but because he made them believe they could do it too. His legacy is also inseparable from his image. The spaceman persona turned him into a mythic figure, especially for fans who grew up on Kiss in their formative years. Even decades later, Ace remains one of the most beloved members of the band's original lineup, often remembered as the embodiment of rebellion within a highly controlled machine. His openness about addiction, recovery, and survival has added depth to his story, transforming him from a symbol of excess into one of endurance. In later years, his steady solo output and touring reinforced the idea that his career did not peak and vanish. It evolved,